Hello and welcome to our brand new show, Firstpost Spotlight, where we bring you stories that matter to you from all across the world. From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, we shed light on issues that shape our world. I'm Alison Lagrange, live from Durban, South Africa. Let's begin with the top headlines. Russia demands investigation after blast hits its consulate in France's Marseille. Moscow brands it as an act of terrorism, which coincides with the 3-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine. The European Union eases sanctions on Syria's energy, transport and banking sectors. The decision is to back the new Syrian regime's aim to reconstruct the war-torn nation. Japan and the Philippines agreed to deepen military cooperation during a meeting of defense ministers in Manila. The talks come amid growing Chinese aggression in the Indo-Pacific region. Bangladeshi security forces report over 8,600 arrests after a 2-week-long crackdown aimed at targeting gangs allegedly connected to the ousted Sheikh Hasina government. And Australia imposes over $600,000 fine on Telegram for missing a deadline on informing about measures taken by the app to tackle terrorist and child sexual abuse content.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
Hello and welcome. 3 years ago, on the 24th of February 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced special military operation against Ukraine. The world called it the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Planned as a swift show of Moscow's geopolitical priorities, it triggered Europe's bloodiest war since 1945. The Russian leader suggested this offensive as Moscow's endgame against NATO's expansion along the Russian borders. Over 1,000 days later, the Ukraine war has no clear winners, only ruins. The war has left Ukraine devastated, Europe fragmented, and Trump-led America frustrated, as Russia's growing conflict of attrition rages on. Now, Russia controls nearly a fifth of Ukraine's internationally recognized territories. Just in 2024, Russia captured approximately 4,200 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory, mostly in the mineral-rich Donetsk area. In the latest, Ukrainian President Zelensky said he is ready to resign from presidency in exchange for Kiev's entry to the US-led military alliance of NATO. Zelensky's comments come days after US President Trump labeled him a dictator without elections. Washington has increasingly cast Zelensky as an obstacle to peace, criticizing his refusal to negotiate on anything but his own terms.
If it's about peace in Ukraine and you really want me to leave my position, I am ready to do that in exchange for peace. Secondly, I can exchange it for NATO membership if there is such an opportunity. I'll do it immediately without a long conversation about it. I am focused on Ukraine's security today and not in 20 years. I don't plan to be in power for decades. Therefore, that's my aim and my dream.
Entering this US-led military alliance may remain a distant dream for Zelensky-led Ukraine, as the United States has already ruled out Kiev's inclusion into NATO. On the eve of the 3rd anniversary of war, as Zelensky called for NATO cover, Russia intensified its drone attacks against Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky said that Russia launched over 200 drones in an overnight attack. This, Zelensky added, was Russia's biggest drone attack since the war began, citing what the Ukrainian leader described as Moscow's aerial terror. President Zelensky called for the unity among Ukraine's allies. Russia's intense drone attacks and Zelensky's NATO plea coincide with Trump-led fast-paced initiative to end the war. The US and Russia are set to meet for a second round of talks later this week. This will be a follow-up to Riyadh's discussions, initiated after Trump's surprise 4.5-hour call with Putin earlier this month. Meanwhile, divisions within the West over Ukraine war are set to unfold at the United Nations. On the war's third anniversary, the General Assembly is scheduled to vote on 2 rival resolutions, one proposed by the US, the other by Ukraine. The US draft, also headed to the Security Council, calls for a forward-looking resolution to end the war. While Ukraine and Europe's text demands Russia's immediate withdrawal, reports say that Washington has pressured Kiev to drop its resolution altogether. The rift between the Trump-led US and Europe deepened after Washington described return to pre-2014 Russia-Ukraine borders as unrealistic. The US also proposed a post-war security arrangement for Kiev that involves the deployment of European troops in Ukraine, but excludes US forces. 3 years on, the Ukraine war remains in a state of a brutal deadlock, with growing signs of fatigue across all sides. While Russia doubles down on its offensive and Ukraine struggles for strategic support, the West's divisions deepen. The upcoming UN votes and the US-Russia talks may signal a shift, either toward a new security arrangement or prolonged instability. But for millions caught in the crosshairs, the hope for a lasting peace continues to be a fragile one. Shifting focus to Germany, where the Conservatives emerged as key winners in Sunday's snap elections, triggered by the collapse of Germany's governing coalition in November last year. Friedrich Merz, the leader of the Christian Democratic Union, or the CDU, is set to become the next German Chancellor. Meanwhile, the far-right Alternative for Germany, the AfD, also made stunning second-place gains. Friedrich Merz-led CDU is leading on 208 seats, followed by Alice Weidel's AfD with 152 seats lead. Incumbent Olaf Scholz's Social Democratic Party of Germany, or the SPD, is down to just 120 seats. The Greens, led by Robert Habeck, are leading across 85 seats. And the left parties and others look set to win 65 seats in the 630-seat Bundestag. Now, Friedrich Merz, the CDU leader, is gearing up to take the role of Germany's next chancellor, but he will need a coalition to back him. Described by his supporters as the solution to Europe's crisis of confidence following Donald Trump's return to the White House, Merz is a familiar face in German conservative politics. The 69-year-old veteran is known for a hardline stance on migration and a love for the world of aviation. Merz joined the CDU's youth wing while still in school in 1972. He was elected to the European Parliament in 1989, months before the fall of the Berlin Wall and the German reunification. Now, Merz was the first elected to the Bundestag, Germany's parliament, in 1994, where he established himself as a leader in financial policy. He lost out to Angela Merkel in a party leadership contest in 2000. A growing feud with Merkel is credited to have pushed him to leave politics altogether. Merz came out of political hibernation in 2021, when Angela Merkel, his longtime rival within the CDU party, left the top job. After 2 failed leadership bids, Merz was selected to lead the CDU in 2022. As a potential chancellor, Merz stands to take the helm of a country mired in a number of crises. He has pledged to reboot Germany's large economy after years of uncharacteristic stagnation, to crack down on migration and lower taxes, all while attempting to wrestle back votes from the far-right AfD, which brings us to the next big winner of these snap elections. The Alternative for Germany, or the AfD, led by Alice Weidel, Her party will be the second largest force in the Bundestag after Friedrich Merz's CDU. The 46-year-old told her supporters that her party is on the path to make government, if not now, then 4 years later. An openly gay politician who lives with her Sri Lanka-born partner, Weidel, is widely seen as an unusual choice to lead Germany's far-right AfD. The AfD leader has ruled against asylum seekers and has pitched German multiculturalism as a threat to the country's socio-political structure. In recent days, she has basked in vocal support of the US President Donald Trump's key supporters, including tech billionaire Elon Musk, as well as far-right Hungarian leader Viktor Orban. The Alternative for Germany, formed just 12 years ago in 2013, was long seen as a political untouchable in and beyond Berlin. This was especially because of the AfD's espousal for the revision of Germany's Nazi past. But it all ended last month. The Conservatives, led by Friedrich Merz, and Weidel-led AfD came together in the German parliament for the passage of a proposed law to control immigration. While the bill never became a law, the unlikely parliamentary unity showed that the AfD no longer is a political untouchable that it once was. However, Merz has been clear that he will not forge an alliance with AfD to form the next government. As Friedrich Merz looks for a coalition partner in Berlin's corridors of power, the far-right public sphere continues to influence German outlook on key domestic and global issues. As Germany veers to the right with a sharp move toward the AfD, who will be Merz's partner in government? And now let's shift our focus to the conflict-ridden region of West Asia. For the first time in over 2 decades, Israel has sent its military tanks into the West Bank as it expands its operations in the Palestinian territory. On Sunday, the Israeli Defense Forces deployed a tank platoon to the northern West Bank city of Jenin, which has long been a bastion of armed struggle against Israel. Israeli tanks were last sent into the West Bank in 2022 as part of Operation Defensive Shield during the second Palestinian uprising. Hamas says Israel's expanding operations in West Bank is a dangerous escalation. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry said deploying tanks in the West Bank is a continuation of Israel's genocide and annexation. It also emphasized on the urgent need for international intervention to curb the Israeli aggression. This comes as part of Israel's military campaign dubbed Operation Iron Wall in northern West Bank, which was launched just 2 days after the Gaza ceasefire began. Israel says its troops will remain in parts of the territory for at least a year to prevent the return of hundreds of thousands of residents and the resurgence of terrorism. Israeli Defense Minister said its forces are conducting operations to eliminate terrorist strongholds, neutralizing militants and destroying terror infrastructure. Around 40,000 Palestinians have fled from 3 refugee camps in West Bank's Jenin, Tulkarm and Nur Shams amid an Israeli assault. At least 27 people have been killed in Jenin and 70 across the West Bank since the beginning of this year. Last week, the Israeli military destroyed more than a dozen apartment buildings at a refugee camp in West Bank. Israel has been widening its crackdown on the Palestinian territory and has said it is determined to stamp out militancy amid a rise in attacks. For years, Jenin has remained a flashpoint city. The camps here house descendants of Palestinians who fled or were driven out in the 1948 war. The city has also been a stronghold of Hamas. Jenin came under Israeli occupation in 1967, but was put under the administration of Palestinian National Authority in 1995 after the Oslo Accords. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the military to pick up the intensity of operations after a series of explosions on buses near Tel Aviv. Now, the latest escalation of tanks being deployed in West Bank also comes as Israel indefinitely postponed the release of 620 Palestinian prisoners from its jails, despite Hamas freeing six hostages from Gaza a day earlier, as agreed upon in the ceasefire agreement. Hamas has said that it will not engage in further ceasefire discussions until Israel releases the 620 prisoners.
Since the early stages, we were afraid that Israel will not stick to this deal. Yesterday, what Israel did is not acceptable by the mediators. Israel doesn't like to see the ceremonies when handing over the bodies of hostages or the alive Israeli hostages. The ceremonies made the political, security, and military leadership feel frustrated in Israel because it shows that the resistance groups are still there and organized, and shows that all this war didn't finish Hamas.
This latest standoff also caused anguish for hundreds of family members who had gathered in Gaza and West Bank waiting for hours to receive their loved ones.
Not allowing the release of the prisoners yesterday is purely because of the hatred they have for us, because they are war criminals. As a Palestinian, we know the Israelis by heart. They don't keep their covenants.
They don't want the families of the Palestinian prisoners to feel the joy. They want to torture them. They want to deprive them joy. They move Palestinian prisoners to buses and then they move them again to the prison. The relatives of the prisoners waited until midnight at Rafah and Ofer, but by early morning hours they told them the release will be postponed. That happened because Netanyahu was affected by how the Israeli hostages appeared.
As the first phase of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas draws to an end, the prospects of truce have once again been put in doubt, and the future of the deal hangs by a thread. Now, from West Asia, we shift our focus to Southeast Asia, where youth protesters have gripped multiple cities in Indonesia. These protests, called Dark Indonesia, are against President Prabowo Subianto's policies. Clad in black, hundreds of students and activists rallied in major Indonesian cities, including the capital Jakarta, carrying posters and chanting slogans against President Prabowo. At the heart of this protest is the president's flagship program of giving free meals to students to help fund this $28 billion project, which will reach 82 million people when fully implemented. President Prabowo instructed his government to cut spending by $19 billion.
The first demand is to get rid of the president's order on budget efficiency. Second, we refuse a national strategic project that doesn't orient for the people. Third is to evaluate the free meals program. Fourth, we refuse the energy and mineral laws. Fifth, we demand free education.
As we can see, the nation is no longer serving and protecting its people. And we know the government is becoming our boss, the boss to the people of Indonesia. Also, the misuse of the law enforcement of police and military personnel being repressive is now seen clearly in many areas. Although not only during Prabowo's era, but he should realize that should not happen. Now we are seeing Dark Indonesia being triggered by the president's order on budget cuts or efficiency, which also affects important sectors such as education and health.
The protesting students say the budget cut undermines their support systems. They say the cuts have negatively impacted teacher welfare and could raise tuition fees. However, the president's office has denied this.
This budget efficiency policy, we believe that because of this, of course, we, students, become victims. Because one of the impacts of this policy is budget cuts in the education sector. When that happens, then, of course, the first thing to happen next is that tuition fees will soar high.
As part of the cuts, Indonesian officials have scrapped infrastructure projects and cancelled scholarships. The budget for higher education, science and technology has been cut by a fourth and has been reduced for primary and secondary education ministry. Now, the students were also protesting against expanded military roles in civilian work and a lack of subsidized cooking gas. While President Prabowo has promoted the free meals program as a way to address child malnutrition, improve educational outcomes and boost local economies, critics have questioned how the government will fund it and whether it is the most efficient use of already stretched resources. These protests that have come just 4 months after Prabowo won a landslide election reflect the broader concern about the country's economy. Indonesia's middle class has been burdened for almost 6 years now. The country has struggled to create enough formal sector jobs. The unemployment rate among those aged 15 to 24 was at 17.3% last August, much higher than the national rate of 4.9%. Around 44 million Indonesians are in this age group and make up around 16% of the population. Unemployment among university graduates has also been increasing. Young Indonesians, many of whom supported Prabowo in the election campaign, are disappointed. Is just 100 days of him coming to power? Will the Indonesian president give in to the demands of the protesters to continue enjoying support for the rest of his term? Or will the Southeast Asian nation witness for a larger people's movement? And that's all we have on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to First Post.
I have made the decision of a military operation.
Военной операции.
Putin's aggression against Ukraine will end up costing Russia dearly. Zelensky better move fast or he's not going to have a country left.